Hey, I'm Patrick from Main Street, and one of the things that comes up sometimes, get asked about, is these Bafang mid-drive motors coming loose and they're mounting. You'll also need to know this if you want to remove one for service of any sort. In order to remove one, it is just held into the bottom bracket of the frame. It's clamped down here. In order to get to that, we have to get this crank arm out of the way. So in order to remove this crank arm, these are what's called a square taper crank arm. It's a taper fit on the spindle of the bottom bracket that is an interference fit into this arm. It's held on. You use an 8mm Allen on this outside bolt. And we'll just take that loose. So in order to pull this crank arm off that is press fitted onto this, we will need to pull it off of there. Just show two styles of the same thing. This is called the bicycle crank arm puller tool. This is a version that's common. Same thing, but you have to use a wrench on this end. Let me go ahead and use this one for the video. So have it out enough that you can get it started. There's threads inside here. And it's a fairly fine thread, so make sure that you're coming in straight. And once it starts going in, we're not ready to pull it yet. You want to thread this in so you're using all the thread, so that once you start trying to pull the crank, it doesn't pull the threads out. Because if that happens, you're in a bad position. Then you're pretty much destroying the crank arm to get it off. So once it is threaded in there enough, then I'll start to screw this in. What that's going to do is it's going to screw tight against the spindle and the bottom bracket and then start to pull the crank arm away from it. And then once it goes some, we're loose. So then this outer piece is basically a lock nut. It's on the outside. And this is still lefty-loosey, righty-tighty on these threads. So we'll just pull that loose. So the main issue that will come up with these is they can start to wear and they can get some movement where the whole motor assembly is loose here. It's the same procedure once you're to this point. If you want to remove this outer nut, then there's a plate here that connects with two 5mm Allens into the motor. Once that is removed and your cables and chain are all disconnected, the whole motor assembly will slide out of the frame. If we're just tightening this up, if it's started to come loose while riding, what you want to do is make sure that it's all the way up. Make sure that these are in the snug position. So the motor actually pulls itself up to the frame when it's pulling against the torque, when it's applying power to the chain. So you want to hold it in that position. And then with it in that position, then you want to tighten this main nut that's holding the motor in. And for this to hold tight, this little plate that bolts in here has some small teeth in it that ideally will grip into the steel bottom bracket on the frame. So we want quite a bit of torque on that. And once that's snugged down, you can put the lock nut back on. You can find those threads. while I'm doing this, it's a helpful tip with threads that are hard to start. If you actually go backwards, there it was. You feel a little click, the thread kind of sets in place, and then you're ready to go forward without cross threading. Now this outer lock nut doesn't need to be as tight. Also, it's actually made of aluminum, so you don't want to overdo it and destroy it. But you do want it nice and snug so that that other nut is not going to move. Then to reinstall your crank arm, I do like to have grease here. It helps slide the arm into position. Make sure you're in the right position as opposed to the other arm. You're not putting them on the wrong way. They should be across from each other. It should be obvious, but I was going to say it anyway. So that just slides in place. And then we set it in tight with the tension on this crank bolt. And this is one that it will start to feel snug, but you actually want to go at least a full turn more from where it feels like you're making contact. Because what you're doing is you're pushing the square taper of the crank spindle into here, and that's what gives it a good strong bond where it essentially acts like one piece and not just something bolted together. So with that on good and tight, we should be ready to ride.